Hello, my name is Paul Lambillion, and this is another little short presentation on one or two esoteric or spiritual and psychic ideas which you may find useful. I'm going to give just a little introduction here about the human aura. Many of you know a lot about the human aura, perhaps. Some of you may know a little, some of you may not know very much at all. So I'm just going to give an introduction of it, talk about it a little bit, and I have two or three friends here off camera who may ask me one or two questions which they think are appropriate to help fill in any little gaps that I leave in what I'm saying. So the human aura, to put into some kind of perspective, I've been observing what I learned was the human aura, and the auras also of all objects and people and things, flowers, trees, animals, since I was a wee boy. And to me, it's a natural aspect of our nature that we know through many traditions, many spiritual and philosophical traditions, is a reality, because it is the light that, the one light, the beautiful, perfect light that seeks to express itself through every living creature, every human being, everything that's part of our physical reality has this light concealed or hidden within it. However, to those who have sensitive vision, clairvoyant vision as it's often called, or psychic perception, the human aura is a reality, and it is this one light which emanates from the source of all being, all creation, whether we call it the divine or the source light or whatever it is. And it's this one light that seeks to be radiating through us, and it does radiate through us, whether we can perceive it or not perceive it. And this is what is the human aura. Now, there are layers to this aura, and so if we look at the human being, ourselves, as the presence here, the physical presence in this reality, and the other extreme of that is our source, the divine, that one light I just mentioned. And as that light flows from the source, it expresses itself in us on many, many different levels. The main levels are what we would call the mental light, which is the light of the mind, where thoughts and ideas and inspirations emerge. And that light is part of this auric field. It's the highest frequency below that light of the spirit. And that expresses itself in many different ways, but it is especially visible as light that is coloured, because it is a rainbow of different frequencies, different vibrations of our consciousness, of our understanding, of our knowing. And that light also radiates through our psychic self, through our emotional or feeling nature, sometimes the astral self. And that also radiates as a beautiful tapestry of many different frequencies of light, which our mind interprets again as colours. And there is yet another layer that many people can see and at least feel. And that layer is what we call the energy body. Sometimes it's called the ethers. It's given many different titles. And that is like a vibrating light very close to the physical body, which tends to appear more as a pale bluish white light radiating from the physical body into the space immediately around us. And all of these layers combine together to manifest as what we call the human aura. And they radiate through us and from us in a vast space that varies in size depending on both the individual and also the viewer. The viewer also influences the expansiveness of these layers of light. To most people, it is the colours in the aura that interest them, and that clairvoyant vision begins to pick up, our intuitive and psychic perception begins to be aware of these beautiful, vibrant colours of light. And there is every colour that you can imagine radiating through these auric fields, as well as some colours that we perhaps can't interpret very easily from an intellectual point of view. There is an auric field, as we call it, or an aura field, emanating from everything. As I said earlier, it's not just every human being, but from every creature, every animal, every flower, every tree, every mountain, every grain of sand, everything radiates this field, which means that everything is comprised of a spiritual nature, a mental nature, a psychic or emotional or astral nature, an energetic nature, and then ultimately expressing in the physical nature that we witness in this material world. And that is the human aura. The colours in the aura change all the time, both in their positioning and their relationship to each other. They change in relation to their density, whether they're bright or dull or patchy with different hues and tones of light within them. And this is something that happens moment by moment, second by second, as well as in a more gradual process of evolution over a lifetime. There's an underlying change that we may witness that progresses slowly. But moment by moment there are temporary changes also that we can witness in this field, which it pulses and vibrates and moves, because we are always moving, changing what we feel, changing what we think. This is part of us that we see reflected in this beautiful light, and we should always be aware of this part of ourselves, even if we don't know how to see it initially. And the techniques for doing that are not complicated, but rather require persistence. But even if we don't see it, we can learn to feel its presence, to sense it, especially the energy body or the ether body, which I mentioned earlier. But that is, in very simple terms, an explanation of the human aura. There are many books written on the subject. I have a book called Auras and Colours, which is still available, and certainly as an ebook, which will explain the fundamentals of the aura, all the many components of it. But I have three friends with me in this presentation today, and it's an informal one, and I'm going to ask them if they've got questions, because it's interesting, to hear what people make of this. So my three friends are here. They might sound like disembodied spirits coming in as they're out of view from the camera, but they won't mind that. They're perfectly in bodies, I can assure you. Physical bodies, energy bodies, astral bodies and mental bodies, and they all have the light of the spirit flowing through them beautifully, radiating with a massive intensity today. But, however, do you have questions that you think might help that we can answer in this brief presentation now?
Well, thank you, Paul. And as we are listening to your explanation of the aura, if any of us were hoping that we ourselves might be able to see an aura, is there any way that would be helpful to go about starting to do that? Maybe?
Well, actually perceiving the aura isn't as difficult as people think, because it's a natural facility in our nature. We've just forgotten, really, that it's there. There are many different ways of doing it, but the first thing, as always, as I say, like a rather repetitive recording, that some kind of meditational practice done regularly naturally begins to raise our consciousness and raise our perception. So that is a kind of central part of any psycho-spiritual evolution or development, I think. So there's that part to it. And the other thing I would suggest is that that we explore our creativity, particularly visually, in things like art, painting, drawing, making things, that is also useful because that stimulates the perceptive, imaginative processes in our head, in our mind, and therefore will lead us to be more sensitive to those more subtle vibrations and frequencies. Also, being out and about in nature can be useful. The frequencies of plants and trees and flowers actually helps to raise our own perception. Some of my earliest memories are seeing patterns around trees and flowers and in fields even. So exposing ourselves to the idea, learning about it, thinking about it, meditating, being creative, all of those things ultimately are simple steps that we can take to really reconnect us with this part of ourselves that we've forgotten is there, because we don't see it with the retina, we see it with the inner eye inside the head. So those are some of the things you can do, and of course, you know, it's perhaps worth attending one or two trainings with somebody that has some knowledge, not necessarily me, but anybody. That can also help. Yeah. Does that answer that, do you think?
Thank you, that's
reasonable
really
way. Yeah. What about anybody else got a question? Yeah.
Yes, often people talk about, they've been told they've got black in their aura.
Mm-hmm.
And they look very sad and disappointed, like something's wrong with them because of that. Can you explain a bit more about the colour black?
Yeah, it's just interesting this. The idea, is there black in somebody's aura? There's one answer to that question. The answer is yes, there's always black in an aura as an idea. The blackness or the darkness in a colour, it can sometimes be the colour has a blackishness to it, even though you can still see that it's fundamentally red or green or something. And this is because the light is not flowing so easily through that ray and that colour, and therefore it means in that part of us that the colour corresponds to, there's some memories or some ideas from the past that are difficult and painful, because everybody has moments of darkness in our lifetime, in our lifetimes, and so it's reminding us of that, and if you like, it's encouraging us to break free from what it is. But equally, if I want to understand the dark experiences of another person, if I want to have empathy and sympathy towards that, particularly empathy, really, then I need to have something resonating in me that corresponds to that. So the darkness in me helps me understand the darkness in other people, and therefore everybody has what appears to be darkness or even black in their aura. I mean, obviously if there's loads of black, then it's quite a problem, but most of us have got the residue. No matter how pious we've tried to live, or how piously we've tried to live, or how much we're trying to improve ourselves and be free from our destructive and dark nature, we retain a bit of it, because once we're perfect, we wouldn't be here. And a perfect aura, people say to me, what's a perfect aura? Well, it's a kind of white gold. And if you've got a white gold aura, then you are pretty special as a being, and probably wouldn't come here onto the earth for very long, because you don't have any need in your own individuality to learn much more from here. But yes, the dark, it's an interesting question, and everybody has a bit of darkness or black in their vibration, in their aura, because we've all been in the darkness at some point in some way. Any other questions that you think might help just pad up the presentation or add to what I've said?
Does the aura normally have just one colour, or does it have lots of different colours?
That's a good question.
Does it change regularly?
Yeah, an aura is never one colour. I've sometimes heard people say, oh, you've got a green aura or a blue aura. There might be many reasons for that. It can be that there's one colour that is very dominant, and so the individual tends to be more receptive to that and thinks the whole thing is that colour. So it can be for that. And of course there are moments when a particular colour will temporarily dominate, the radiance. Like if we are angry, this is an obvious one, but if we're angry, then certain reds and even oranges can actually seem to dominate the space a little bit. But that always subsides after a time, you know, and eventually it all calms down, and then you see this multi-layered, beautiful, vibrant, massive coloured light. But we have every colour in us. We have every frequency in us. There's no frequency that we do not have. What makes us different and unique is the combination that those colours make, how much there is of them, those frequencies, because colour equals frequency in an aura. So how many different frequencies we have? Well, we have all of them, but we have different combinations, and so some people may have more blue, some may have more violet, more red than others, more green, but you will have everything. And this is really interesting because it means that everybody has within them the potential to do anything, pretty much. But the combinations of the colours and their relationship, whether they're close together or whether they're separate, that is what makes us unique. And everybody has a different field, radiates the light in a different way, because all human beings are unique. We're all special and individual and unique. So now we've got all the colours there, but sometimes we can be blinded by a particular colour because it is so strong, you know, in that moment. If someone's in love, they meet this wonderful creature and their heart bursts, you know, and you just see these rose pinks flying up, maybe some other colours too, in a way that they wouldn't normally do that all day, every day. If they do, then you're completely in love and you can't function any other way if it's like that. But usually it subsides and you forget about them at least for half an hour, and then it all bubbles up again. That's just a temporary perception, because we have all the layers in us, and it is the distribution and the density and volume of the different colours that makes us who we are. But we always have the potential to strengthen and develop another part of ourselves that perhaps has been neglected, you know, or we haven't dared to consider in ourselves in some way. And so the appropriate colours then to that idea, to that endeavour, will develop and grow and expand in us as we change. There you are.
Thank you.
So the aura is always in a state of flux.
It's always in a state of change and movement, yeah. Sometimes very quickly. You can look and see some things changing very quickly. And then sometimes we have a spell of relative tranquility, and therefore things are moving a little bit more like a sea, like a tide, a gentle tide. The sea is a very good metaphor for the aura. They talk about the tides in the astral or the psychic self, the movements. Although the word astral means star-like, it really is like a tide. And just like the sea, you know, sometimes you look at the sea and it's beautiful, isn't it? It's calm and wonderful. And another day the waves are bashing on the shore, and then you get everything in between at the sea. And it's exactly the same with the human aura. It's always moving and it pulses. The colours pulse very gently in the aura, but sometimes they pulse very strongly and then they suddenly start to move. If somebody came rushing into this room right now and said, "Fire, fire, get out, the building's on fire," don't do that because it's not true. But if that was happening, I can assure you that our auras would change very rapidly, and there'd be lots of activities as the thought forms that are in the aura and all the other matter that's in these colours, all the other features, would be very busy because we would be concentrating on survival and removing ourselves from the room. But once we got outside and calmed down and we realised there wasn't a fire at all, or it's all under control, then everything will settle down, you know, and become calmer, and then we feel, yeah, I feel okay now, you know, I can cope with whatever's going on. So it moves, but it moves depending upon where we are generally, what state of mind we're in, and so on. Yeah, there you are. Good.
And would that be true if you were listening to a piece of music that was particularly, you know, brought up feelings of love and...
Absolutely. If we listen to beautiful music, or somebody reading a beautiful poem, or even watch a movie that really inspires us, or a play, or whatever it might be, of course, yes, that changes us, and that's very interesting because the aura will change. And what it's telling us is that the poem or the painting or the music actually reminds us of something in ourselves, and it stirs that up in us. You know, that sound, that beautiful word, that phrase, that picture, that whatever it is. Yes, the aura will start changing in its response, allowing something from deep inside us to come to the surface. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. You should ask that. Well, I think we've covered the basic points here, which was the idea. We hope you found this useful, and I look forward to maybe presenting some other things in a future time. So thank my friends for being here, and I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful.